I go in rooting for a movie. I
Yeah,
genuinely do.
I ordered the remake of The Wolfman not 28 days later.
Solid direction, really strong performances.
I thought Julia Garner was a block of wood. I'm sorry.
But objectively, without argument, everyone must agree that An American Werewolf in London is the best werewolf movie ever made.
You are about to enter a new world, and you will never view entertainment in the same way again. This is Popcorn Theology.
Welcome, movie lovers and theology nerds, to Popcorn Theology, where we examine films for where they align with the greatest story and our greatest storyteller, discussing what to receive, reject, and redeem for common ground, fruitful conversation, and mindful movie consumption. I'm James Red Riding Hood Harleman.
And I'm Damien Thorn. No, that's he's from The Omen. I'm Joe Thorn.
Yeah, that's a good distinction to make. Although, man, that'd be a whole other subset of movies to do someday. No, today we are looking at The Wolfman. Actually, Wolf Space Man, just to make sure we differentiate from some other versions. Directed by Lee Winnell and starring Julia Garner, Christopher Abbott, and Matilda Firth. But we're going to talk about Wolfman, the Wolfman, the werewolf, and much, much more. So if you like, or if you liken lycanthropies, whatever, like and share this episode with your friends. If you agree or disagree with our opinions, let's broaden the conversation. And make sure you subscribe on YouTube and follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Discord. Joe, why don't you give us, shall we say, a fuzzy summary of this ferocious film?
Sure. It centers on a guy, Blake, who grew up under a, I would say, well-intentioned but somewhat oppressive father until he bolted. And now he's a husband, and he gets word, and a father, he gets word that his father has been declared legally dead. He's been gone for years. He disappeared or something. We don't really know. So Blake brings his wife and their troubled marriage and their daughter to his boyhood home, which is a very rural, isolated farmhouse. And upon their arrival, he is attacked by something, some animal, and as the moon slowly rises, he slowly changes. That's how I would summarize it.
Dun, dun, dun. Now, just to make things a little more official here, since Joe typically only kind of comes on the show for our horror episodes, so thank you, Joe. Since some of our guys are just a little, otherly motivated with movies. But this one I think should be somewhat particular to you because you are the werewolf guy, right? Self-proclaimed.
I don't know if I'm the werewolf guy, but I favor the werewolf lycanthropy lore more than the vampires. I typically am drawn more to the Wolfman. Yeah.
Okay. So fine, a werewolf guy, maybe not the werewolf guy, but a werewolf guy. And is this something the whole what's the family breakdown? Is the whole family werewolf folks? Have you brought them into the fold, or is there?
Well, my son Killian, I in Facebook I sent you I don't know if you saw them yet. I sent you a bunch of pictures of his room.
Yeah.
His bedroom, and it's all horrored up, and he really likes all kinds of horror, but he does seems to favor some of the classics. But he loves the 1941 Wolfman, Frankenstein. He loves the old Universal monsters, and so he's in. My older son Elias, he likes horror movies. Catherine likes horror movies. Madeline, not so much, and my wife, not at all.
So nobody's Twilight, though, right?
No, we're all anti-Twilight.
Okay, good.
Sparkly vampires are out.
Well, and even those werewolves were kind of sus. I don't know if I really could.
I never saw one frame of the film, so I'm out.
Well, so we're talking about the 2025 Wolfman film, at least first and foremost. So, as some of you know, listeners and viewers, we have our popcorn ratings: stale or fresh, or if we really liked it, buttered and salted. Fresh, kind of in the middle. Stale, obviously disappointing. So, Joe, as a werewolf guy, is your favorite vein, and I figure you've probably seen scores of werewolf films. How did Wolfman fare for you?
I can't wait for us to talk about this because I don't know how you rated it. You don't know how I rated it. We haven't talked about it. I'm really eager because we might fight. I don't know. We might have to call in some mediator. This is complicated. I'm not conflicted, but it's complicated. I have many good things to say about the film. But I have one major problem with the film that is simply too big to give this anything other but a stale rating.
Wow. We don't have too many stales on Popcorn Theology, to be honest.
Yeah.
We do not have that many stales. And I think maybe in the past I have been wary of going there just because, we want to talk about the film. We don't want to turn off anybody who liked the film.
Yeah.
And so we try to, I think I've consciously tried to avoid the stales and err on the side of, well, I'll give it a soft fresh or a low fresh. But this was stale for me too.
Yeah, really? See?
Stale. Maybe more so, I may have less good to say about it than you do. Well, we'll have to see how that goes. I think if somebody has never seen many horror movies and has never seen any werewolf movies, and if they're like a teenager, maybe experiencing their first horror rated R movie, body horror, etc., I could see if it snags them and makes them interested in watching more. That's like the only real good. Like that's like, okay, that I hope is something that could come from this. Like that's where I'm at, and yeah. So I'll be excited to talk about the what's and whys, or maybe where we still differ. But yeah, okay, both stale. I think this is a first for Popcorn Theology.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I think they got the two right guys on it. I think is what it is. Because we love movies. We love filmmaking. I mean, and it takes a city of people to pull off a movie. It takes so many people who are so dedicated. And I have so much respect for any movie that is made. It's so much work. And so I never want to just dump on a movie. But if I have to give it a rating, this is what it's going to be.
Yeah. Well, how about theology then? We often grade things on kind of diluted, kind of like a soda, diluted, or is there some carbonated stuff we could talk about, or does the cup runneth over? I'll go first. I think part of my problem with this movie is I really feel like it fell down on some things it wanted to say. So, I mean, I can always find something to talk about. So I might say I could always say that the movie's carbonated, but if I'm really being equally strict, I found it kind of diluted as well.
It is diluted, but I'm going to go with carbonated. But it's a carbonated drink that's been sitting out for a few hours. That's how I'm gonna have to. There's some stuff to talk about, but not a lot. In fact, part of what I was writing down about it was, and we'll get to it, but some of the questions that you typically ask on this podcast, I'm like, not a lot to say here. Not a lot. Like we can talk because, we have a worldview and theological grid and all of that. But there's just not much here for that.
Yeah. Well, I hope that's not too much of a downer for people who may have seen the movie and liked the movie. Again, I think if some people are coming to this podcast and maybe they haven't seen a ton of werewolf movies, hey, maybe they have and they want to. I would be excited to hear alternate opinions. So listen to the episode. Tell us where maybe you think we maybe missed a mark. Who knows? That's what part of this is all about. I remember my wife and I coming out of several movies, like big movies, even like The Dark Knight, with radically different opinions. And so that's always what part of this is. And of course, one way you can help support the podcast is just rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, spread it around so that other people can join in and broaden that conversation. You can also support us another way, though, Joe. You want to? You always tend to bring this up when we have episodes.
Your Patreon, your Patreon. You guys always say that just by donating a few bucks a month, you can become a patron saint. And this is the only time you're really supposed to give money to obtain sainthood. So I'm for it in this case. I think this is good. I know, like this gives you like
Joe. It's not an indulgence, though. Just to be clear, it's not an indulgence.
Maybe it's the good kind of indulgence. I don't know. You got to come up with some kind of a rhyme for it, like Tetzel. But what this gives you like access to like a host of all kinds of benefits. There's a Facebook group and a special channel on the public Discord server. You get to vote on future episodes, which is always super fun for people that are into films. There's premium seating members that get special weekly, like in the lobby podcast episodes. And I think you can join those live, right, when they're being recorded?
Yeah, absolutely. So, that's about all we would want to say. And also, if you rate and review us, if you actually write a review anywhere out there in the media sphere and actually link to it, let us know. David, one of our other co-hosts, will send you some free merch. So that's also just an incentive to write and review and say free stuff, become a supporter, It's all good. But we may wind up howling and baying about this movie here in just a few minutes. So we'll drop the spoiler warning. But first, we'll run some ads. Stay tuned, and we'll be back with popcorn perceptions and theological reflections on Wolfman.
Up in the sky, look! It's a bird! It's a plane!
Cinemagogue, The Marvelous Era. James Harleman here, the cinema guy, announcing the sequel to my first book on film and faith. Let's face it, entertainment has changed dramatically since the first book published in 2012, and comic book characters and franchises are everywhere. So I decided to set my sights on superheroes and examine the evolution of Hollywood in this follow-up to the first Cinemagogue book. For example, what does Loki tell us about culture's view of God? Why does the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the Infinity Saga continually align with biblical themes? In the Marvelous Era, I review each film and show not only how the individual movies express gospel parallels, but each phase essentially reveals a multi-point sermon. I also explore DC, Star Wars, the Monsterverse, and more. Without compromising scriptural truth, we can sift these stories and discover how we might reject, receive, and redeem ideas for personal reflection and Christian conversation. Also, has Hollywood's messaging gotten worse? The book explores ways these marvelous mythologies correspond with conversion, Christian living, church history, and Reformation, but I do also highlight what has been the entertainment industry's darker, indoctrinating decade, as well as toxic fandom and the dangers of immersion in pop culture that just might drown us spiritually if we're not careful. So suit up, assemble, and join me on a journey to the Infinity Saga and beyond. Cinemagogue, The Marvel Us Era. Now available on Amazon.com in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle editions. Hey, this is James, and if you're listening to Popcorn Theology, it's because you're interested in movies, or theology, or best of all, both. And that probably means you're our kind of people, sharing things in common with our community, and maybe sharing common interests our listeners and viewers would be interested in as well. So why not partner with us and advertise your business or ministry right here on Popcorn Theology? We're looking for great, like-minded sponsors and offer reasonable rates with a variety of formats to get your message out. Remember, our fans aren't mindless consumers, so they'll give you thoughtful consideration. That's a big part of what we're all about. So for more information on advertising with us, contact info@popcorntheology.com.
Come out, wherever you are. Come out, wherever you are.
And we're back, dropping the spoiler warning as we dig deeper into Wolfman. And first thing we're going to do is just not get too deep on the theological stuff, but just pop a little popcorn and talk about our popcorn thoughts. So, now let me think. Before we even get to this movie, I think it'd be a good idea, since we talked about you being a werewolf guy, I actually have quite a background watching a lot of werewolf movies. So prior to seeing this, Joe, what do you think if you have a favorite, or maybe top three, or just most memorable werewolf movies for you? What comes to mind?
I probably have 8 that I really like a lot for different reasons. And it's all preference. Everybody's got their own thing, but objectively, without argument, without any dissent, everyone must agree that An American Werewolf in London from 1981 is the best werewolf movie ever made.
It may be still uncontested as of this movie, I would say, for sure.
It is. What a fun, brilliant, scary movie. I love Landis. Anyways, that's definitely a big one. Of course, the 1941 movie, The Wolfman, is one of my favorites. I actually really like the 2010 The Wolfman. A lot of people didn't like the CGI, but the design, and I liked it felt like the Wolfman. Dog soldiers, ginger snaps, and I always mention Silver Bullet, even though it has the worst looking werewolf. Well, not anymore, but it has one of the worst looking werewolf. But what a fun werewolf movie! I love Silver Bullet.
Nice. That's a good. I want to go back and watch Dog Soldiers, and I do want to watch the Wolfman with Benicio del Toro, Anthony Hopkins. I want to rewatch it because I was like, the director was Joe Johnston. I don't find it sticking out memorable in my mind, but now that I've seen this remake, it's like, well, I want to go back and kind of check out the others, and so that's definitely on my list. And so here's the interesting thing: I wasn't allowed to watch a lot of horror movies as a kid. Even into I'm living at home. It's high school. Still not really supposed to watch horror. Very kind of a strict Christian home. But there was this TV series called Werewolf on Fox that I would sneak down to the other TV in the like the family room, and I would watch it. It was set up like the old Incredible Hulk TV show. It was episodic. He was characters moving through town, actually being hunted by a bounty hunter named Joe Rogan. By the way,
No way.
yeah,
No way. I've never heard of this.
no relation.
When was it?
This
Was
was
this 90s?
late 80s. Late 80s.
Really? I've never heard of this.
An awesome werewolf design, obviously television level effects, but
Sure.
it had 2 seasons. I still own it. It's cheesy like old Hulk shows or Quantum Leap.
Yeah.
It was that same every time he's in a different place with different people. He werewolves out at just the right time to actually not kill anybody and kind of solve the situation, kill the bad guys. Right? I mean,
Right. Good. Get them.
but that came after, I think, the success of American Werewolf in London, and they sort of tried to roll out with it. It was one of the original Fox TV series when they were just getting started. So, a lot of fun. You already named a bunch of them. I do love the underworld movies. Michael Sheen will always be one of my favorite lycanthropies. Just in those movies, Being Human is the UK version is actually a great series that has a incredible werewolf transformation narrated by the guy as what it's like to go through it. And it was kind of fascinating. You didn't mention Wolf, though, with Jack Nicholson, Michelle Pfeiffer, James Spader. Probably one of my favorites. I will try to talk about that even as it relates to this movie. Very, very recently, though, have you seen Werewolves Within? It's based on a video game, slightly comedic.
Yeah, are they? No, see, a couple of them came out at the same time, and I think I'm conflating them.
It's worth checking out. It just came out a couple years ago, and also there is an episode of Black Mirror you may or may not have seen that is worth seeing.
I haven't seen that.
The one time Black Mirror stepped out of, I have to look it up. Werewolves Within. It was more of it was a lower, like, it wasn't indie, but it didn't have a big star.
Okay. Yeah, I'll check it out because I don't think I've seen it. Then I'm drawing a blank on it.
Fun, a little sprinkle of comedy in it, but very, very fun. And if you haven't seen the episode of Black Mirror where they step out of technological fears and actually deal with supernatural, it ruins the surprise, because that was part of what was fascinating about the episode was, boom, they just went full supernatural and there's a werewolf. But still worth watching, just because it has a pretty fun. I say fun. Most people wouldn't call it fun, but there you go. So, okay, we're getting into this movie then. There's lots of good werewolf movies to watch out there. And again, now we're going to have to talk about why we feel like this one maybe just didn't measure up. And so I'm just going to throw the ball to our guest host, Joe. What was it that you liked or didn't like? Why was it stale? You did mention things you did like. So break it down for us. Let's start with the good. What did you like?
I believe it is a well-crafted movie, solid direction, really strong performances, beautiful cinematography. It's moody and atmospheric, really good practical effects. I love I just called it Werevision, which it was a little bit like it felt like almost an homage, but better than Wolfen, what was happening in that back in the day. But
that's a deep cut for some people.
Yeah, I'm sure they haven't seen it. But this is not the Wolfman. It's not Wolfman. It's not the Wolfman. My fundamental problem that makes this very problematic is that this is another Universal blunder. Universal owns the IP to the Wolfman and Frankenstein and Dracula.
Mummy.
Yep. And they're screwing up every time, and it's not the director's fault, it's Universal's fault. Writers and directors can come up with their own versions of werewolves and lycanthropy, and it's fine. It's good. I like that. I like different takes and different approaches, and some that are a bit more grounded in the real world, and maybe they have different takes on what a werewolf is or looks like. In fact, there's one that I'll definitely get to it later. I'll get to it later. But that I think does this very sort of thing. But they're supposed to reboot. They're trying again to reboot the Wolfman. 2010 was better. And in terms of what they were really going for, look and everything. This is just a major blunder. The dark, what is the dark world, dark universe, whatever they're trying to do. Like this is a total colossal failure because the Wolfman, you know, he is not a werewolf. And one of the guys I follow on Letterboxd, he was like, well, he's not a werewolf. He's a wolfman. And I'm like, but what are you talking about? This is universal. This is the 1941 was Wolfman. It was the Wolfman. Two separate words. This is that, and he is a werewolf. But the conception of it here is interesting, but not for Universal, not for a reboot of what they're trying to do. This fails hard, and because of that, if it wasn't a Universal picture, if it was just like an indie film or something else, I would be like, oh, that's really well done. I'd like very creative, good job. But for this, no, big L.
we totally agree on that front. If this was some indie movie, in fact, there is an indie movie, not about werewolves, but it was actually a vampire movie called From the Dark. I was up one night, couldn't sleep, wife was already in bed. I was like, well, I want to watch something. We'll turn on that. I found this Irish horror movie called From the Dark. And it's not a couple with a child, it's just a couple, but they're kind of lost out in a remote area, driving through Ireland. They find this cabin and hijinks ensue, but it's vampire instead of werewolf. And it felt to me in many ways. And I came away, I woke up the next day, I told my wife, this was great. Like this was this tight little dark indie film, very narrow. I think there's only like 5 people in the cast. Like that's all. It was just a very focused story, one night, kind of like a lot like this story transpires. And even the way it plays out, one of the characters getting bit. So they're dealing with the main threat of the attacker, but then one of them's changing. All kind of the same things. And if this had been something I found at 11 o'clock at night because I had insomnia, I would probably raving about it a little bit.
Yeah,
but this is Universal's Wolfman.
Yeah.
Like you don't screw that up. And that's what made me really sad. It's like in another world, I actually really like Lee Winnell. Have you seen Upgrade?
Oh, love Upgrade. Such a fun movie.
But first they give him Invisible Man, which was just a kind of tiny film about a stalker boyfriend and toxic masculinity, instead of like The Invisible Man and Holly Griffin are way bigger than that. And they screwed that up, in my opinion. Yep. And now they've screwed up the Wolfman, kind of in the same way. And it's like
it's frustrating.
This would be like if they said they were going to remake Night of the Living Dead, but they gave us 28 Days Later. Like, no, you can't have a rage virus, not in a remake. No. A reimagining is something totally different. A different movie, great. Like, exactly. And
that's a great analogy, because 28 Days Later, I love 28 Days Later. It's not a zombie movie. And it's not. It's great.
I love it in its lane. Yeah.
Right. Deep dish pizza is great. It's not pizza, though. I'm sorry. It's just not. I'm from Chicago. It's not. It is not pizza. It's its own thing, and it's amazing. But the best pizza comes from the East Coast. Sorry to tell everybody.
Well, and even if we disagree a little bit there, if I go order Chicago style and I get New York style, like that, then I'm mad, right? Like, no,
of course,
that's not what I ordered.
That's an injustice.
I ordered the remake of The Wolfman, not 28 Days Later, not a rage virus that was where you get Harry, which is what this was.
I'll tell you what, I don't like feeling like this, but it made me feel like all those Star Wars nerds when they're mad because Kathleen Kennedy or somebody's messing with their world. I'm like, you nerds, why don't you calm down? And now I'm like, whoa, what are they doing? I'm the nerd. I don't like that feeling. Thanks a lot, Universal.
So we definitely agree. Like, it had moments. My wife Kat said there. But here was the problem with me. All the moments that I thought were great. My Kat put it best. My wife, she said, the best moments I enjoyed, they were moments that reminded me of better movies. As good as the practical effects were. It's just, she's like, oh, this is great. Almost as good as American Werewolf in London.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, and there's a whole moment when you're sort of getting the wolf sense or the wolf vision of the different things. When he hears the spider.
Yeah.
There's some moments in the Jack Nicholson movie Wolf where his senses are changing. But it's far more interesting. and even the father mother daughter relationship that was troubled. Like Speak No Evil did that better last year.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. The
and the
stake.
body horror just it's like, well, I've seen that done better in
Yeah.
The Fly. Like there, and here's where we disagree though. I thought Julia Garner was a block of wood. I'm sorry, she might be good in other movies, and Christopher Abbott. I didn't think the performances felt flat to me, and that might be the script. That it's. I feel like, again, we'll talk about this later. They were trying to communicate something, but it felt like The Invisible Man had a theme, whether you like it or not. It was very much toxic masculinity and stalker boyfriends, but this movie felt like maybe it intended to communicate something, but then it pulled back from really communicating anything of substance. And I know the movie got pushed back and retooled, so I'm wondering if maybe they tried to retool things in such a way that it just felt hollow. It just didn't work to me. And so, and I mean, maybe if Julia Garner acts like this when she plays the Silver Surfer in the Fantastic Four movie, I mean, if she's supposed to be sort of cold and emotionless, then I mean, hey, congrats, she'll be great in Fantastic Four as the Silver Surfer. But here, I just like when she, I'm not sure what they were going for, but it just always felt like she was staring blankly, and that was her only emotion.
Here's my. Have you seen her in Ozark?
No.
Yeah, she's like one of the best things on Ozark. She is brilliant. She's a brilliant actress.
That's why I think maybe it was just the script.
Yeah,
or how it got edited. Yeah.
It's the script, but it's also the story. We're talking about a husband and wife that are living separate lives. You know, they're not together, but they're together, and I'm sure we'll get into that. But so she's cold. She's cold, and the one moment where she's warm is when she's telling him, "I love you." And it's like, oh my gosh!
And I just didn't feel that. In fact, like we even had a debate when it came out. Kat was like, "Did they try to play it that way?" Because she's like, "I'm not sure that I even felt that she meant it. She was just trying to be comforting." It's like, what? How?
Yeah, well, it could be.
And so it's like,
I mean, but see, for me, it's like, well, maybe that's the point. Maybe like there is just a coldness there. But there isn't enough of a, like, where's the town? Where are the other people? Like, this is the Wolf Man. Like, it's interesting to put it in the context of a family of three.
Yeah.
But we're like, it's the Wolf Man. Like, it's supposed to be a bit bigger than this. So that's why it's part of my issue is that it's, and by the way, I think whoever Homeboy was from, like, Dragon Porn or whatever the show was he was on, Game of Thrones. There's a look. There's a look that I look for. And Lon Chaney Jr. had this look. He has this look. Benicio del Toro had this look. It's the dark, sad, isolated man. And that's part of why I sort of resonate with it, right? Not that I'm dark and lonely, but you know, he had the look. I think he had the feeling, the vibe of that. But he's a father. He's got a wonderful little kid, and you know he's driving his life from that. But yeah, it was just messy. It was kind of a messy storyline. As small as it was, you would think it would be nice and neat, but it felt sloppy.
It felt muddled. So here's what I would throw out. Maybe some people actually liked this movie and they're like, well, this just made me interested in watching some horror movies and werewolf movies. Or maybe people watch this movie, or maybe some other people are feeling like we did, like, okay, I tried watching a werewolf movie and this was kind of lame or stale. So if there was a best or better movie, if you're not sure if you like werewolf movies or if you're interested in more, what would you tell them to go watch next?
I take people through movies, and so I try to get them to watch the 41 Wolfman, and I want and I have to kind of prep them for it, right? And it's an old classic, Universal monster movie, but I think it's wonderful. Appreciate it for what it is, and then watch An American Werewolf in London, because I could be wrong, but I think it's the first time when you see the transformation as a grueling, painful, excruciating experience.
Yeah.
But even the way Landis directs this and shoots this, it's in a brightly lit room. It is, all the lights are on. It's in a living room. He's screaming while there is music playing that doesn't really match what's going on. And it's funny. It's got heart. The love element is there.
Yeah.
It is such a great, those are honestly the ones I go. But if people like this, if they do like this, maybe they know a little bit about it's not a cheesy, like, a guy in a suit, then watch Where, W-E-R. Where is a great werewolf movie, and it's more found footagey because it's a lawyer defending a client who is accused of these brutal murders, and she's trying to figure it out. And he's a werewolf, but it's kind of real world lycanthropy. So he looks more like this guy than your traditional werewolf. That's a better movie by far.
Yeah, I'd forgot about that. That's a good call. Yeah, that's a good one. I would say, for me, I would just say go check out Wolf. It to me communicates a lot more because it's a metaphor for aging. It's a metaphor for predatory men, but also then it's the differential between being a predatory man, but also then men who are losing their drive or their appropriate masculinity, kind of regaining it. And you just have some fantastic performances by Nicholson and Spader, with Michelle Pfeiffer kind of caught in the middle, and you also don't have it's not. I think people who like this movie may like the fact that it's almost more, it's less, it's not the full snout like my friend here behind us. It's not the full snouted, full wolf kind of Wolfman, but it's actually a little bit more of just a person becoming wolf-like and taking on traits. And so that's where I would say that's probably a good entry point for people who may have liked that movie and go. But we should probably at this point dive into things that are a little deeper and sift that. So we'll pour the glass of soda, as it were.
That sounds carbonated.
It does. Now, and you may wind up being right as we talk. It's not that there aren't things to talk about. But my problem with this movie is I feel like they had things to talk about, and I feel like maybe they edited the heck out of it and leached out what could have really made it the most poignant. So
because it's not the Wolfman.
Yeah,
it's not.
So what if there was a theme or an idea or stuff that did stick out to you? What was it?
It is underdeveloped by immeasurable degrees, because inherent in a werewolf story is the curse. And so, but it's still there. It's just underdeveloped and uninteresting. But anyways, one of the things that I always appreciate about the werewolf mythology is that it is a curse of some kind. And as a curse, it always reminds me, it parallels sin in a lot of ways. The curse, the infection, the growth, the spread of sin that brings with it this need, this longing for some kind of a cure. And as Christians in particular, we know this struggle more keenly than non-Christians do, because we have that Romans 7 struggle, right? Like the werewolf, when you become a werewolf, in I think in all of the mythologies, it's against your will. It's a curse that comes about because of a variety of reasons. It could be you've done something bad or you've been bitten. But you become, this thing takes over you and you wind up doing things that you don't want to do, right? So I pulled up Romans 7. For I know that nothing good dwells in me, that is, in my flesh. For I have the desire to do what is right, but not the ability to carry it out. For I do not do the good I want, but the evil I do not want is what I keep on doing. Verse 24, wretched man that I am, who will deliver me from this body of death? That's werewolf. Like that is an inherent part of that curse.
Yeah.
So that's something that I see. I don't know if you see that or if you see something different, but that's something that I always pick up on in this genre.
Well, so I think something that even came out almost dovetailing on that was like they didn't really have it be a curse in the traditional sense of I think in the original 1941, it's like a family curse. And so they tried to emulate that a little bit here by having it be like the sins of the father being passed on.
Yeah.
And
I saw that.
And that's where I feel like the film just communicated that poorly. There was this thread of Blake's dad having anger issues and his son's trying to not to emulate those things. And obviously then the creature turns out to be his father, so it punctuates it. And
we all saw that coming. Nobody was surprised by that. But go ahead.
No. But then, of course, he becomes the monster. He becomes the father, and then the bleak climax kind of suggests maybe it's inevitable. So that's a very dark story. That's like a life under the sun. There's no way out of, like, you become your father. That's it. And so it does. It reminds Romans 7's great. I thought of Romans 5:12, where it says, "Therefore, just as sin came into the world through one man, and death through sin, so death spread to all men because all sinned." And so, but here's my problem, which, and we might disagree a little bit. Here's my problem. Grady wasn't that bad.
Who, his dad?
Yeah, like, he makes his kid he makes his kid make his bed to military standards. What a monster! And then his kid wandered off in the woods where there may be a wolf man killing people, and so his dad gives him a very authoritarian dressing down. But there was no belt, there was no beating. Not even spanking. Like the film does little to make me presume he's anything other than a traditional dad, maybe even a Christian dad. He's not a modern gentle parenting kind of guy, which, by the way, is a failed experiment that's ruined an undisciplined generation. But
hang on. Amen. Go ahead.
Right. So I was just thinking about Ephesians 4:26. It's like, in your anger, do not sin. Like, we see Grady has anger, right? But he doesn't push his kids down. He's like, there were times in my life where I did dumb things, and my dad had to use a loud voice to shock me, and he would grab me by the shoulders and he would talk to me like eye contact, face to face. It's like, that wasn't abuse. And I'm not even sure. Like, he gets a little extreme. Then the son gets extreme, right? When his daughter jumps up on the barriers. I don't know. To me, Grady, in the opening scene, which, by the way, the opening scene with his son was one of the most tense and scary.
It was.
Like their encounter with the wolf was actually was cool.
And you don't ever see it really at all.
Right. Yeah.
Yep.
Like, Grady's angry in that scene. His father's angry, but he doesn't sin. He rebukes his son. I even looked up the Wikipedia plot summary of this movie. It says, during a hunting trip, a young Blake Lovell and his stern father Grady spot a mysterious creature lurking in the forest. It's like, okay. Stern is not sin.
No.
And so
no.
And this is where I think the movie thought it communicated that the dad was bad, but it didn't in my book. Like, it's like I'm supposed to infer it from a very soft authoritarian moment of being stern.
Let's be honest. Like, first of all, if the kid doesn't know what's real, then his dad comes off as a hard case, right? His dad comes off as you're a little intense, you're oppressive, like whatever, not abusive.
Yeah.
But if you know what's going on, he's kind of moderate. In fact, it would be a far more interesting story if he was abusive out of his fear. That would be a more interesting and probably more realistic if it's that serious. If there is a monster that will eat your kid, you might beat your kid to get him to, not that you should, I'm saying that would be sin, but that might be a bit more realistic. It would certainly be the stakes would be higher now.
Yeah.
And now he hates his father. That's why he's never been back. He hasn't seen his dad in years. His dad disappeared and died. And he's like, what are you going to do? He's declared dead. But why such distance if he was only stern? But if he was abusive, overreacting because of fear and maybe going crazy, how do you not go crazy fighting a monster? That would be I think the stakes would be higher to be more interesting as a story.
Yeah, and I think we see that. I think I was just thinking about The Witch, Robert Eggers' The Witch, and how like the dad is so extreme. And you actually, okay, well, I see why the kids are kind of maybe reacting strangely or rebelling a little bit. And they just didn't give us enough. They needed to give us more for there. Yeah. So trying to understand the movie from sort of the descent of Blake, I didn't feel like they gave us enough. So they didn't give us enough on the dad front. But then there was also a seeming thread of, okay, he's lost his job, but his wife seems to be doing extremely well. he seems to be a bit of a house husband, and you could maybe infer he's emasculated, but I didn't feel like Abbott played the role that way. He actually seemed pretty pleased in his role, and the only thing he was unhappy with was that his wife seemed to not notice what he was doing and was on the phone. In fact, if you flip the sexes on that, she was the workaholic. Like she was the bad workaholic head of the family who I think about the movie Hook, where a Robin Williams character, like when it's a male character that's about their job to the detriment of the family, we always indict them. And they even tried to toy a little bit with her, saying, well, I feel disconnected from my daughter because I've been a workaholic. But like those threads never felt like they went anywhere to me. It's like if this was a movie about her, about one spouse being disconnected from their child because they're all about their job and needing to reconnect and love and passionately save their child, that didn't really play out. That didn't.
No.
And
there's no payoff for any of it, really.
Yeah.
It's like they're trying to shortcut the storytelling to go like, okay, so they're alienated, and then what's the payoff? There's never, if you're going to shortcut it and summarize, then you better have a big payoff to make it worth it. I just don't see anything really coming together that way.
I felt like this movie played it safe. I felt like the movie probably got retooled a few times, where maybe they wanted to have her be the workaholic and needing to actually reconnect with their daughter, but then they didn't really go there. They wanted him to maybe have some anger issues, but they barely showed any. They showed like one moment of anger with his daughter and an irritation with his wife on the phone. So it's like
which every couple, every parent has done. Like there's like, okay,
right. Like
sorry, we all do that. Yeah.
Right. So it didn't feel like it was like this movie could have worked as a alpha male toxic masculinity message if they wanted to. And it could have worked for her to be like, she's the absent mother who needs to but none of those things it felt like they tapped the shoulder, they sort of tapped on those and then pulled back. And it's like they were afraid to really show any of them. Like they were afraid to offend having a bad father. They were afraid to offend having a disconnected mother. They were afraid to have a toxic man. So they just had nothing.
Yeah. The only thing that I liked, not the only thing, one of the things that I liked about the way these characters moved through the story is that in the crisis they were all strong. They weren't weak. They weren't like just fall down. They all were ready to fight for their family, for life. And I appreciated that because, it's so easy to fall back on, oh, this is the hysterical one and this is the strong one. I liked that. I thought like, okay, there's something there. But because the characters are generally unlikable to me, I don't like them. It's like, okay, well, it's just not that compelling.
Yeah, that's where I felt like Speak No Evil worked so much better because you had characters that were both likable and unlikable.
Yeah.
You had a dysfunctional marriage and you actually understood the dynamics of why the marriage was dysfunctional, which I just don't feel like they really gave us here.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that a script could solve with just a few extra lines of dialogue here and there, just sprinkled in. So it felt undercooked. And so I couldn't connect to the problem to really feel emotional about the resolution. You are right, though. I did like that, like when push came to shove, they were all about dealing with the situation, being protective. Like that, there's some beautiful stuff in that we can talk about later. But I just felt like the movie, it's like it wanted to communicate some themes and ideas, and just felt like it felt afraid to. And maybe that's just the place we're in, right? I mean, I think we've seen a decade of very, very preachy movies, and now maybe I think we've also seen that a bunch of them fail at the box office. So it's almost like they pulled back from any message whatsoever, and so it just felt a little hollow.
Again, but here's the thing, it's like preachy movies don't work because they're self-righteous and they're very on the nose. It's like, okay, thank you very much. but good art preaches, right?
Mm-hmm.
It does. Whether it's secular or like the music that I listen to that is 99.9% secular preaches,
Mm-hmm.
even though it's just oftentimes describing life as darkness or difficulty or pain.
Yeah.
It is preaching something in that. So there is a clear sort of thrust, an idea, an ideology, or a message. And this, it didn't really have that.
Yeah.
There was like, in the end, I guess I don't want to get ahead of us, but a couple of things. But again, nothing unique. Anything that I would like about it, like I thought it looked fantastic. I really liked the way they shot a lot of it.
Yeah.
But in terms of the story, anything that I was like, well, that's not bad. That's pretty good, but it's not original, and it's been done a million times, and I'm much more satisfied in other forms of it or other films.
Yeah. Well, and even that you talked about the kind of wolf vision. Like there's a beautiful moment in the movie where, like, she's in the dark, and that kind of pans around to the way that he's seeing, and there's some wonderful moments of that. Like I gotta say, it's one of those things where, like, for craft, I want to give it an A.
Yes.
But story, I want to give it an F, and then it just sort of, and then it takes it's not the Wolfman hit, and sort of falls down. So that's one of those frustrating things.
And I will say this: if my son was scratched or bit and started to look like that guy, it would be the scariest thing I'd ever seen in my life. That guy is scary looking. He's not a werewolf, though. He looks horrific, but not a werewolf. It doesn't work.
Yeah. Well, that's maybe a good transition point. So I do think that there are things we can enjoy about this movie. We've talked about the craft. But if we move into our lightning round and kind of talk about, okay, what are our takeaways on a full moon night?
All right.
Although then my mind, I'll get all the criticisms out of my system. Also, like, when a werewolf just dies from one bullet shot, it's like that's just sad.
Yeah,
I know. One non-silver, like that's all it took. I mean, I think
silver is a more modern aspect to the mythology, but still, but it's understood, it's embraced, and just a bullet, because okay, so he gets like, he looks like a scary looking. He looks like a crackhead. He looks like a crackhead, a homeless crackhead with fangs. That's what he looks like.
Yeah.
He looks like a meth head. He doesn't look like a crackhead. He looks like a homeless meth head with fangs, which is a scary thing. I would not want a homeless meth head coming at me with those fangs. I would be scared. I don't know.
So what are some ideas we might thoughtfully receive, reject, redeem from this film? I'll reiterate the one that I kind of brought up. It's just, I think something I feel like I watched the movie and I want to reject is the idea that I think they're trying to communicate somehow that stern is sin. And I just think that I don't float with that one. Like, stern is not sin. And I think, like, Jesus was not traditionally, quote unquote, nice. And anybody who thinks he was needs to read the Gospels again. Like, that's, like, he is a wonderfully merciful, compassionate, and yet fierce teacher and discipler of persons. He's probably closer to Grady than people want to admit, even if Grady maybe in there had some excesses between the lines that the movie didn't show us well.
I think you need to relax, James. You're making it sound like Jesus called people sons of hell and kicked tables over. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you need to just chill out a little bit.
Oh, that's true. I mean, the Bible says that, but
I think you're right. I did forget.
Whoops. He also said your father's the devil, right? I mean, just there was some.
You make your converts twice the sons of hell as you. I mean, Jesus had hard words, especially for he had hard words for the self-righteous,
Yeah.
and he was very direct. And I think you're right. I don't think I was really dialing into that as much, because I'm trying to figure out, did the film present the father as his actions as sin or as wrong? And I don't know that they did. I didn't think that they did, but then I remember, again, I just saw it. But when Blake talks about his father, he says, like, oh no, like he wasn't, he was basically a bad man to me. And like, we didn't see that. And we didn't
Yeah.
get any indication of that other than he's super protective and stern because the devil is in the woods around your house and you're stupid and running off close to the devil.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's going to get mad. He's going to yell at you. He's going to shake you. And so, by the way, the kid and the actor that played the adult, pretty good. They looked like
Yeah.
looked like
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
There you go. Boom.
Good casting.
Another
Another
check
feather in the
mark
cap. Yeah.
in the mechanics of it. What was the word you used? The
craft.
The craft. Yes, the craft. Very well crafted.
Yeah.
You know. So I don't think, like, what would I reject in this movie? It's like, I don't know. Blake and Charlotte, they're married, they're living separate lives, and I don't think it's presenting that as anything good.
Mm.
It's almost like Homeboy is suffering a curse of sorts in his marriage,
Yeah.
that needs redemption, and I think I wouldn't reject that. I would say I think it's highlighting that.
Yeah.
That's something. There's not a lot to wrestle with in terms of antagonists or really bad examples because it's all kind of mid.
Yeah. Well, so that's something I think we can redeem. I mean, I think what we see in the movie is there's a problem in his marriage, and when it comes down to it, like you were talking about, he winds up being in the very traditional role of a man putting himself between danger and his family, and which costs him his life.
Yep.
But it's the traditional role of protector. It's the traditional role of sacrifice. It's the model of Ephesians 5, right? I will lay down my life for my family. Laying down his life means he literally gets this infection and becomes this monster and needs to be put down like a dog. But he is that man where he absolutely will. I wish we don't get to see the fight between him and the other one, but right, he obviously did some damage and bit off fingers.
Why show something cool? Yeah, why ruin this movie by showing something awesome?
And he harshly stood between his father, who at that point was truly, obviously evil, monstrous because he was a werewolf. But he stands between that, and that's where if they'd shown the dad as more officially evil, it would have worked for the metaphor better later. I don't know. Yeah,
they should have, and he should be struggling with the same rage. He should be struggling with that same overreactive, truly oppressive. That should have been a part of the story because now we have a real conflict. There's no conflict. I don't feel anything for these people.
This is something The Shining did very well.
Yes,
that's that's the deterioration of a man's mind. Both TV versions and the novel. It's that's you have a guy who has this rage and brokenness in him, and it's evident, but he's trying to overcome it, but he's succumbing at the same time all the while. That's why this movie just reminded me of films that have done this better, and that made it frustrating.
Yeah, well, all the werewolf movies I can think of that I like are better. Silver Bullet is better, dude. Silver Bullet. Come on. I think I like the thing that I picked up on that I thought was good was this idea of love. He obviously loves his daughter.
Yeah, that's true.
Clearly.
Yeah.
And they have a cool relationship. I like the actress that played Ginger.
Yeah.
Um,
I wonder if that was a nod to Ginger Snaps anyway, but go on.
oh, I didn't think about that. Yeah, it has to be because they pulled from a lot.
Yeah.
But the idea of love stood out, and what I noticed was, as much as the love was present between him and his daughter, the absence of love demonstrated between husband and wife was felt just as much. Like there was just a coldness there. And so that was something that I saw that, again, speaks to brokenness that makes you say, well, okay, well, we don't want to just watch the movie and walk away. Like it should make us think about all the things that matter. You have a family. So any husband, wife, if you've got kids, you should be able to watch any movie like this and you should feel something.
Yeah.
And even if they're not doing a good job in eliciting or evoking the feeling, as thinking people, we should be able to go, okay. It does, it naturally, you put yourself in the state or the seat of the protagonist oftentimes. But like, so what do I do? What do I need to do? What would I do? And I don't know. I watch movies and I wind up thinking, not what would I do in that situation, but what do I need to do in my life? Like that's just how I think about things. Like, oh, okay, that's really good, or that was really lame, but like it makes me think about where I'm at and what I'm going through and how I should be living or responding or thinking or being, for that matter.
Well, and it's an all too common thing, right? We're dealing with a lot of our friends right now whose kids are just hitting 18, just moving out of the house, and it's really a testing moment of has your relationship been about getting this kid to adulthood and onto their next phase, and where is your marriage at? Because in this movie we see mom feels disconnected from the daughter, but he's been working with the daughter, but their marriage is basically in an empty place. Like their relationship's in an empty place because they've been focused on raising her, and that's a tenuous place to be.
Right.
And then there's even that moment, and this is something I think that we should probably try to receive or redeem about this movie, is there's that moment where I mentioned it earlier, like she tries to reassure him that she loves him. But if I remember right, that's at a moment where he no longer is quite hearing the words and he's not processing it. And that just made me think like, oh, wow, this movie communicating something important here where she's saying she hasn't maybe said it in a while, but she's saying, I love you, but he can't hear it now. It's like, guys, like husbands, wives, you need to communicate how you feel now. Don't delay.
Yeah.
Like be
good.
reconciled now. Like Charlotte, she tries to communicate she loves her husband, but his mind, like it's
too late.
Kind of too late. It's too late for him to hear it. Like that as a metaphor is sad. Like that's tragic and powerful.
It is powerful.
And he's deteriorated to this place of actually being now kind of against everything. It's like, what? I think a relationship can get to that point, and that's tragic. 20 years of ministry, I've seen I have sadly had to walk with relationships at that point.
Sure.
And not see them reconciled.
And now it's making me kind of go back through it. I was frustrated while watching this movie, and I went in with low expectations, and I was still disappointed. But that what you just brought up makes me wonder, because directors are smart guys, right? Oftentimes they're very thoughtful, smart guys, and even if it doesn't always translate, they got a lot going on. And now I'm wondering, is maybe the metaphor here is just very different. Maybe there really is something here about, the corruption, deterioration of a relationship. That what you pointing that out, because I remember that. I remember that, like, oh, he can't hear her, which, by the way, was a brilliant way of showing what's going on in the mind of a person going through the transformation. I thought that was awesome. Like, oh, he can't. He's becoming animal, which is By the way, like that, talk about a biblical concept. Like when the psalmists, like David and others, Asaph, when they talk about their sin, they talk about, oh, I was like an animal. I wasn't like, that's what sin corrupts humanity. It's like, oh, to err is human. Not really. To err is sinful humanity, but like perfect humanity isn't about that. And so so redemption is like the restoration of humanity, and this is like the corruption of it. And so it's like you become a beast, the psalmists say. I was like a beast before you. I wasn't myself. So I think there are some things there that would be good. I'm not going to watch it again. I can tell you that. But I'll think about it. I certainly will think about it. Because it's, you know, I like the effort. I like the creativity. But it was definitely the wrong platform and the wrong studio and the wrong IP. And like you're pointing out, like there definitely are some problems with the script and the story, from our perspective, anyways. Yeah. I'm sure some of your listeners loved this thing and thought it was the best thing ever, and that's cool too. Like that's what's great. Like I like stuff that nobody else likes, and people like Dune, and I ain't got time for that, so that's fine. Yeah. Oh, by the way, you know what? You know what really made me mad last week? You know what really put me in a mood? Is I watched Interstellar, because everybody's like, oh, I slept on this for 11 years. It was so great. I watched Interstellar. That movie sucks. Hate that movie. What a saccharine, syrupy, stupid, lame. And I'm a big Christopher Nolan fan. That movie is horrible. Anyways, go ahead.
Well, that's a rabbit trail we don't have time to chase in this episode.
I'm probably in the minority on that one.
Oh, it wasn't my favorite Nolan, but yeah. I wonder if some people, you think about maybe a couple in a real distraught, disconnected, terrible place in their relationship goes and watches this movie, and they're like, we feel like these people in this moment, and maybe something speaks to them. This is where I feel like God can redeem even a movie that maybe that most people or movie fans like us or cinephiles or werewolf movie lovers can be like, well, this is stale. That may or may not be true, but it's not like God can't take this movie and have a couple whose relationship and communication is broken go and watch this movie and be like, oh crap, it's not like we're probably going to turn into lycanthropes and die soon, but if we should probably fix this before it's unfixable. And that is like, if anybody comes out of this movie and repairs their relationship because they realize that they're as broken and disconnected as these two characters, that'd be a win. So
big time.
That's where Romans 8 comes in. Like, God can use all things, so He can use this movie to have a disconnected couple determine themselves to reconnect. Like we have to fix this
before it's too late. Yeah. Right. But before I turn, before we get so hard-hearted that God gives us over to our lustful desires. Right. So like that's actually, I think, really a really good word, because God does use all kinds. I wrote a whole article on how God used heavy metal to prepare me to hear the gospel. Because he absolutely did. Yeah. And I can totally see Him doing that with this very film to help people kind of wake up to see like how bleak it is to not fix and work towards repairing like the most important relationship you'll have on this planet, which is with your wife.
Yeah.
Or your father, or your husband.
Yeah. So that's where I hold out hope. It's like, okay, this may disappoint lovers of the original Wolfman. This may not be a great remake. This may suck on a number of levels. Whereas I think Nosferatu was like, Nosferatu's everything kind of I wanted as far as paying a loving homage to what came before. So like we're coming to this new year with a remake of Nosferatu and a remake of the Wolfman. One very much embracing the beauty of what came before. One kind of chucking it to play with a bunch of new things. And although we prefer the former, if the latter has some fruit in somebody's life, praise God. Like
And it will.
that's where. So
Yeah.
I hope anybody who's gritted their teeth and thought, like, why don't these guys see how awesome it is? Like, well, no. There's plenty of places where this movie could be redeemed for wonderful purposes of our creator. So, like, nothing happens by accident. This movie exists for a reason. It was stale to both of us. If it has good comes for anyone because of it, that's where I love our God. He works things through extremely crazy things. We're going to get to heaven someday and find out that somebody was edified in a way that led them closer to God through Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. So I don't know how that happens, but it could happen.
I'll tell you this real quick. When I was, I started hearing the gospel when I was 17, 18, 17. And first time. And so God's bringing these Christians into my life, and I'm coming out of the occult, and all this weird stuff's going on. And I'm listening to a Steve Vai tape in my car. I just got it. And at the end of one side, going to the other, a voice comes on. I know what street I'm driving down. It's crystal clear. I remember this vividly. I'm driving in my Ford Escort, and it's hot. The windows are down. And a voice comes on the tape, and it says, "You're walking a fine line between paganism and Christianity." That's it. That's all that said. It was David Coverdale from Whitesnake speaking on Steve Vai's tape. And I didn't even listen to that kind of music. I like metal. But for whatever reason, I was listening to that. And I was like, what the heck? Because I was taking in all of this gospel, and I'm totally pagan. And God used that and a bunch of other things to really push on me until I was converted. God uses all kinds of stuff to prepare us for what's next if we will simply respond. So I think you're right. I think people will I think God will use this movie to direct people. Absolutely. If they're willing to do what your whole podcast is about.
Yeah.
To not be mindless consumers, I think you say.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, Joe, as always, I appreciate it. This is a unique experience. This is the Popcorn Theology first, where we've reviewed a stale movie and yet been able to talk about how it can glorify God. So, on the one hand, I'm glad I had you. On the other hand, I'm sorry we had you on for a werewolf movie that was probably the least werewolf movie.
I was kind of mad at you. I was like, I'll try. Oh my, are you kidding me?
I was going into this wondering, I wonder what he thought of it. I wonder if he's going to think it's just, I said, because man, and it's what I say, I know sometimes that movies, you can be emotional you can have a bad day and then you can take it out on the movie you see. And I know sometimes, or you can have a good day and then like you can just weirdly judge a movie because you're in a weird zone. But the fact that both my wife and I walked out and asked, how'd you, we were on the same page. I was like, all right, I kind of suspected you might be on the same page.
I go in rooting for a movie. I genuinely do.
Oh yeah.
I have low expectations, but I'm rooting for it. I try to like it. To like it. And boy, they had me. That opening night, I was like, this is fun. Oh, this is good. This is tense. And then, okay.
Oh, well, for everybody who disagrees with us, they went into this episode with the same anticipation, and now they're terribly disappointed.
Oops.
But that's okay. That's okay. We are happy to hear why it was maybe somebody's favorite werewolf movie, or maybe why it was their. And hey, if it was anybody's entry point into scary movies, and they go seek out more, and we would say better, well, hey, that's a win too. So. But thank you, Joe, for bearing with me and walking
Always
through
fun.
this. Yeah,
always fun.
But we'll go ahead and roll the credits for this episode. And until next time, keep engaging movies and media from a godly perspective. And remember, you are not a mindless consumer.
Thanks for watching this episode of Popcorn Theology. For more content, subscribe on YouTube. Follow and interact on social media to help broaden the conversation. Check out our archive of past episodes at popcorntheology.com or wherever you listen to podcasts, and consider becoming a patron saint by supporting us on Patreon, which lets you interact, influence, and enjoy exclusive bonus content.